Howard Hughes showed incredible potential for success from a young age. Before his 13th birthday, Hughes built a motorized bicycle out of spare parts from a steam engine and created the first wireless radio transmitter in Houston, Texas. Sadly, Hughes lost his mother when he was 16, and then his father only 2 years later. His parents' death made Hughes the owner of the family tool company and an estate worth close to $1 million. Because he was uninterested in managing the business, Hughes hired accountant Noah Dietrich for the job. In just 5 years, Dietrich grew the estate to an astonishing $75 million. Over the next 2 decades, Hughes's meteoric rise to prominence continued. First, he became a notable film producer and the winner of an Academy Award, and then he built a Hughes Aircraft Company and became a key player in the birth of the aviation industry. By the age of 60, Hughes was the world's richest man, but by that point, his life had taken a tragic turn. In his later years, Hughes developed an irrational fear of germs that took over his life. To avoid germs, Hughes isolated himself in sealed-off hotel rooms for months at a time. He lived naked to avoid contact with clothing that might contain germs, and wore Kleenex boxes on his feet to prevent contact with the floor. Near the end of his life, Hughes avoided contact with everyone except his security guards and doctors. Even his wife, Jean Peters, had not seen Hughes for years before filing for divorce. The story of Hughes contains an important lesson, and that is fear can affect the quality of your life. Now, while many people will never experience the crippling level of fear felt by Hughes, many will be affected by fear in some way. As an example, if you let the fear of rejection keep you from asking for a promotion, you may never get ahead in your career. So in this video, I want to explain how you can keep fear from taking over your life and give you a framework for overcoming fear. Before you can manage your fear, you must first understand the important distinction between 2 types of fear. Rational fear is an appropriate level of fear linked to a specific object or event. Rational fears act as helpful warning signs that have kept humans alive for millions of years. An example of rational fear is the fear you would feel if you were attacked on the street. In contrast, irrational fear is an unrealistic level of fear linked to specific objects or events. Dentophobia, or the fear of dentists, is an example of irrational fear. Irrational fears act as false alarms that cause you to be overly afraid of things that are far less threatening than your brain believes. And it's these false alarms that can affect your life in 2 ways. First, irrational fears often cause you to avoid things that improve your life, like dating a great person because you have an irrational fear of rejection. And second, irrational fears can reduce your ability to make logical decisions. That's because when the fight or flight response is active, the thinking part of your brain is impaired. So when you're constantly overwhelmed by false alarms, you often make poor decisions. Thankfully, fear doesn't have to control your life. When it comes to managing your fear, there is one particular treatment that has been proven to be highly effective, and that's exposure therapy. Studies show that a single session of exposure therapy significantly reduced fear, avoidance, and impairment in 90% of patients and completely eliminated phobias in 65% of patients. What's important to understand is while exposure therapy helps many people feel less fear, the treatment can't guarantee that outcome. And that's because there is no way to control your emotions. But what exposure therapy can do is help you develop the courage needed to face your fears. Okay, let's take a look at why exposure therapy works. Consider someone with claustrophobia, the fear of confined spaces. This person might have an irrational fear of getting trapped inside of an elevator. This irrational fear exists because their brain has created an irrational association that says, if I use an elevator, I will get trapped inside. As a result, they avoid elevators at all costs. Now, in reality, the odds of getting trapped inside of an elevator during any single trip are extremely rare, at a rate of 1 in 1 million. Exposure therapy works by turning irrational associations into rational associations. Here's how the process works. Research by Joseph Ledoux explains that when you repeatedly show your brain that something you think is threatening isn't actually threatening, your brain rewires a new association. Then, once you have this new association, your brain stops ringing the false alarm. To explain this concept using the elevator example, the association, if I use an elevator, I will get trapped inside, might become, if I use an elevator, I could get trapped inside, but that is highly unlikely. Hey, I just wanted to take a quick break to tell you about my app, Aware. Aware is a self-improvement based meditation app, and it has dozens of courses that teach you important skills like how to make better decisions, build good habits, and develop more self-confidence. The app combines all of those lessons with guided meditation, which helps you develop the state of mind and self-awareness needed to apply what you've learned. On top of that, you also get the benefits of meditation, like improved focus and sleep, plus a reduction in negative emotions like stress, anxiety, and sadness. The reason I think Aware is different is because every session is unique. In the hundreds of lessons inside the app, you'll hear interesting stories, helpful ideas, and be asked thought-provoking questions to support what you're learning. So if you like the type of content you see on this channel and self-improvement in general, then I think you'll love Aware. It's available on iOS, Android, and the web, and you can get started today for free with the links below in the description. Let's get back to the video. Okay, here's how you can use exposure therapy to overcome your fears. Step number 1 is identify what's holding you back. It's important to remember that rational fear is helpful. So using exposure therapy to address rational fear is a bad idea. As an example, if somebody points a gun at you in an alley, that's not the kind of fear you want to overcome. One way to identify fears that are worth facing is by asking yourself the following question: what do I wish I could do? The answer to this question helps you identify the things in your life that are holding you back. Now, some common answers to this question might be, I wish I could ask that person out on a date, or I wish I had the courage to start a YouTube channel. Step number 2 is write down what you expect to happen. Once you identify what you wish you could do, it's time to ask yourself what you think will happen if you do it. As an example, you might think that asking for a date will end with someone laughing in your face, or you might think that people will criticize your ideas if you start a YouTube channel. Step number 3 is start small. Some people practice exposure therapy using a technique called flooding. With flooding, you begin on day 1 by exposing yourself to the largest stimulant possible. So if you have a fear of spiders, flooding is the equivalent of covering yourself with tarantulas on day 1. There is some evidence that flooding works, but most people find the treatment extremely uncomfortable. Therefore, a better approach is a technique called graded exposure. With graded exposure, you start with small stimulants and build to larger stimulants. Now, to give you a better understanding of how graded exposure works, here's a sample graded exposure progression for addressing the fear of spiders. In step 1, you begin by looking at pictures of spiders. Then in step 2, you'd progress to watching videos of spiders. In step 3, you might look at dead spiders. In step 4, you might look at live spiders in a cage. And finally, in step 5, you might hold a spider. Here's why this process works. Each step in a graded exposure progression is designed to produce the highest amount of fear that you can tolerate at that time. By repeatedly exposing yourself to that level of fear, you eventually become comfortable with that stimulant. When that happens, you progress to a new stimulant that again produces the highest amount of fear that you can tolerate. Finally, you repeat these steps until you reach your desired behavior. Step number 4 is write down what actually happened. Once you find the courage to take your first small step, the next thing you'll want to do is write down what actually happened and then compare that to what you expected to happen. In most cases, what you expected to happen will be far worse than what actually happened. So if you ask someone for a date and their answer is no, it's unlikely that they'll laugh in your face. Instead, it's far more likely that they'll politely decline the offer. And if you want to post a video on YouTube, it's unlikely that you'll be flooded with criticism. Instead, it's more likely that you'll receive some criticism, but more praise. Ultimately, what this step does is help your brain rewire a more rational association. Step number 5 is ditch your security blanket. Many people who feel fear in certain situations often rely on objects or rituals to make themselves feel comfortable. So if you fear social interaction, you might bury your face in your cell phone to avoid talking with other people. Or if you're nervous before a big presentation, you might develop the ritual of obsessively checking and rechecking that you're ready. In the beginning, these objects and rituals can be comforting, but in time, your end goal should be to eliminate them altogether. And finally, step number 6 is add variability. Once you overcome your fear in one context, it's important to try to overcome that fear in other contexts. So if you found the courage to ask for a date using an app, try to ask for a date in person. And if you found the courage to post a video to YouTube, try posting the same video to Facebook or Instagram. Before I go, I want to leave you with one final thought, and that is a quote by Mark Twain. Twain said that courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. You see, the truth is, you'll always feel fear in certain areas of your life. Even the most successful entrepreneurs, athletes, and entertainers feel fear for many reasons. The one thing that all of these people have in common is that they find the courage to take positive action despite feeling fear. And if you can do the same thing, you can prevent fear from taking over your life. I can't thank you enough for watching this video, and I hope it was helpful. Now, I am shamelessly trying to grow this channel, so it would mean the world if you could subscribe, like, and share the video. Believe it or not, it takes over 100 hours to make these videos, so any help would be greatly appreciated. As a final note, I've also got a list of helpful resources linked below, like a transcript of this video that covers all of the ideas I shared today in a clear and organized format. Thanks again for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you soon.